Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to episode 15 of the 11th season of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. No social media for you this week. We've got a couple of weeks here where we've not covered a song, but some nice overdue deliveries came for me since I last recorded. First of all, I received my copy of Jeff Slate's superb album, The Last Day of Summer, on vinyl. It's an album that I really enjoyed first time I listened to it, but it's really grown on me as well and hugely rewards repeat listens. Jeff's a fine songwriter and a musician and has a wonderful, very distinctive voice. So if you haven't checked that one out yet, please do. There will be an episode, there will be a link in the episode notes for you to go and check that out. I also received the 3 Matt Jaffe CDs that I ordered in, I think it was like late November. The Canada post-strike really backlogged everything getting from the US to Canada. But hey, they got here, so that's the only thing that matters. My plan is to eventually buy the rest of his back catalogue, and Jeff's actually. But I started with 2021's Undertow and Kintsugi. Those were the first full albums of Matt's that I really listened to and got into back in around about 2023, I think it was, when Mark put me onto him. And I love the vibe and the tone on those records. Plus, Kintsugi has one of my very favorite of Matt's songs on it, Cut Me Down the Middle. I also picked up Matt's fantastic latest album, Gone Enough to Miss, and like Jeff Slate's latest record, I cannot recommend this one highly enough. Matt's songwriting improves with every album, and he's really hit his full stride on this one. You can hear all the elements of his live performances combining with his now excellent studio craft. And what you get is a singular, iconic set of songs capped off by the sensational closing track, Crying Lessons. Okay, before we start this week's song, though, I did want to just give a quick shout out all of the amazing first responders and emergency personnel who've been dealing with the horrendous wildfires in California over the past week. And to all my friends down there, I hope everyone's safe. I hope you're all doing okay. I hope all your family's doing okay. And you guys are finding out and figuring out how the hell to get through all this. My heart breaks for all the families who have lost loved ones or property, including sort of those family heirlooms and keepsakes that you just can't replace those things, right? I look around my basement and I see little things that the kids have made for me, and I think how utterly devastating it would be to lose them. Of course, the house would be a catastrophic loss financially, but timber and carpet and glass and shingles, those can be replaced. But lifetimes of memories and those mementos and small items of huge emotional significance, they really can't be. So hopefully, once the dust has settled, literally and figuratively, the communities and families down in California affected by this awful natural disaster will be able to find ways to come together and rebuild and rediscover some sort of normalcy. If you do have some extra money that you can part with, you can help out by visiting redcross.org or calling 1-800-RED-CROSS, that's 1-800-733-2767, or texting the word CA Wildfires to 90999 to make a donation. I know that every little bit would help in, starting the rebuilding process. Okay, let's get into this week's song, which is the timelessly beautiful and heartfelt Angel Dream. All right, the first thing to mention is what I think I've said on a previous episode. This is probably the only episode of the entire catalogue where I'm going to cover 2 versions of the same song from the same album at the same time. Of course, the lead track from Songs and Music from She's the One, Walls, has Circus and the number 3 version. However, those 2 versions are so radically different that I can talk about them each on their own episode. Angel Dream numbers 4 and 2 are, by contrast, are the same length, same tempo. They use the same vocal take and guitar tracks, and have just a few differences musically. Number 4 obviously has the percussion track, and it has some keyboard in there and just a few extra elements that I will sort of touch on. But what I figured I'd do is talk through the differences as we go through the song where I think they're sort of relevant, but use number 2 as kind of the baseline, as that's the, in quotes, purest version of the song. On May 18th, 2020, Paul Zolo posted the following words on his Facebook page. Still gets to me, this one. He wrote it the night after meeting Dana. He dreamt of her that night, and this song came through. He said he never thought love at first sight was real till then. Happy birthday to the very dear Dana York Petty. You're one of the best things to ever happen to Tom. Tom confirms this to Paul in conversations with Tom Petty, and when asked about the numbers 2 and 4 that he used to differentiate the two versions of the song on the album, Tom laughs and replies, "There is absolutely no reason for those numbers. That was just a little joke. Yeah, I wrote that as I fell in love with Dana." For her part, Dana posted a comment to the Tom Petty Nation Facebook group about the track saying, "I will never forget the day he wrote it and called me right away to sing and play it over the phone. For years, he'd say it was his favorite song he ever wrote. He was such a beautiful human. I miss him more with each passing day. I'm just so blessed that we found the real thing." So we are dealing this week with a very, very personal song written for a very specific person, when with a very profound sort of meaning to it. But back to that number 2 and number 4 thing, I do wonder too if it was a little playful back reference to the Wilburys. That completely arbitrary decision to use Volume 1 and Volume 3 as the titles of the two albums, just out of mischief. You would have thought without listening to the songs that they could possibly be the take numbers, but it's cool to actually have a definitive answer from Tom that it was just a bit of a joke. It's really surprising to most people, and to me, I guess, that this song was never released as a single, which the Heartbreakers tended not to do with ballads. But in a 2005 interview with Billboard magazine, Tom voiced his frustration about this when asked why the band didn't put more love songs and ballads out as singles. Tom's response was, "Something that irritated me later on was that my labels always went with something that was up-tempo and had an electric guitar on. In the last days of FM, just before it just died, it used to drive me nuts. If there wasn't a guitar solo, they didn't want it. So, something like Angel Dream, which has got to be one of my 10 best songs ever, was completely overlooked. But this is life in the big city. What can you do?" Which shows you that even an artist as big as Tom has to sometimes go with what the guys upstairs want. It reminds me of that great quip by Chris Rock, who's talking about Shaquille O'Neal. And he says, "Everybody's saying Shaq is wealthy. Shaq ain't wealthy. The dude paying his wages is wealthy." And so it goes for artists too. Unless you're going to be entirely independent from recording up to distribution and marketing, at some point up the chain, you are going to have a boss. And I can only imagine how hard that grated on Tom's nerves from time to time. There's a big difference between art and commerce. And of course, one supports the other, but it still means that it's a crying shame that Angel Dream was never released in its own right. You have to think that it would have had the potential to be one of those sleeper hits that no one really sees coming, but catches fire. The first and most striking difference between the two versions of Angel Dream is obviously the percussion. It's a really interesting part that's doing basically the same thing for a long time, then changes up slightly with the addition of a tambourine, but it's also drenched in delay and has a pretty big reverb on it, so that you get the sense that there's actually more going on than there is. So I isolated that percussion to listen to, and here's what it sounds like. And that's a really cool piece of composition and quite unlike anything else I can think of off the top of my head. Actually, the only thing I could probably compare it to is some of the percussion on Paul Simon's seminal Graceland album and some of the stuff that he did post that, like Rhythm of the Saints and that kind of stuff. And I think it's a combination of hand claps, shakers, maybe wood blocks, possibly a kick drum in there, which I think might be being played by hand with like a padded beater or something rather than actually with a kick pedal. It could be a kick pedal too, but it does sound a wee bit more delicate. So I'd be curious to know that actually how they played that. And I wondered at first if it might just be, 4 or 8 bars that was then looped. But after having listened to it in isolation, it's definitely been played all the way through, which just makes it all the cooler to me. The second major difference is that the finger-picked guitar that leads us off is panned hard left on the number 2 version, or let's call it the acoustic version. And on the number 4 version, or let's call that the percussion version, the guitar is mixed into the center. This gives the percussion version a much denser feel right from the get-go. The other thing to note immediately is that this lick is lifted directly from one of the songs on the Wildflower sessions that didn't make the cut, but that we ended up hearing on the All the Rest release. The song I'm talking about, of course, is Harry Green. And let me tell you, I can't wait to talk about that song. The difference between Harry Green and Angel Dream, and I just noticed that the syllable count is the same in both titles, is that Angel Dream changes from major to minor in the verse as it gets the tagline, I can only thank God it was not too late, where Harry Green stays in the major key. And right away, as I so often find myself doing, we have Tom playing with structure here. You could argue that the chorus is that single line. I can only thank God it was not too late, but it's not really a chorus. It's just the tagline at the end of that verse. So really, this song is verse, verse, bridge, verse, small, tiny little outro. The other thing I talk lots about in this podcast is opening lines and how damn good Tom was at writing them. I dreamed you, I saw your face, caught my lifeline, went drifting through space. And what an incredible way to say, I fell in love with you the moment I saw you and knew that my life would never be the same again. And I was talking with my pal Corey Morissette on our show, The Ultimate Catalogue Clash, about lyrics a couple of weeks ago. And we've had an ongoing discussion since then about how to appraise lyrics. Well, one of the ways that you can say a lyric is, quote unquote, strong or good is if it immediately evokes an emotion in you. And boy, does this one ever do that. I think most people have had this happen in their life where they've just immediately fallen in love. And if it's not happened with a romantic partner in this specific way, I dare say that anyone listening to this who is a parent had it happen the first time they laid eyes on their first child. You know in that moment that nothing will ever be the same and that you immediately can't live without that person. And I know this happens with partners too, but I suspect it doesn't happen this dramatically all that often. So for this to happen to Tom at this time in his life when this was written, and for it to happen to an artist of Tom's caliber, what a gift to be able to capture it and explain it and condense it so perfectly into that line. In the second verse, there's some keyboard added on the percussion version, well, on both versions, and it almost sounds like on the percussion version an accordion in there, but I can't find anyone credited with that. So it's more likely it's just some kind of strange patch or effect that Benmont's using. You also get some fairly low organ notes in there, and so this it adds a sense of brooding to this second stanza in the percussion version that isn't there in the acoustic version, which has much more of a yearning feel to it. It's an interesting, very subtle tonal shift that the additional instrumentation adds in the percussion version of the song. And I think part of this is that on the acoustic version, that keyboard part, that organ part, is an octave above the guitars and the melody, where on the percussion version, it's an octave under, or at least in the same register, but I think it's an octave down. My guess would be that they tried a few different keyboard parts over top of the main track and then pulled out different takes for the two different versions. The guitars, though, I'm pretty certain are the same take, and I'm positive that the vocal is. Over mountains, I floated away. Across an ocean, I dreamed her name. I followed an angel down through the gates. I can only thank God it was not too late. It's such brilliantly simple, yet enormously evocative songwriting, isn't it? One of those that if you're a songwriter, you look at and think, oh, man, I wish I'd written that. It has very obvious specificity in that we all know who Tom wrote this about and why, yet it still retains that broader quality of being open to different interpretations. The idea of transcending the mundane to experience the numinous pours through these lines, and there's that dreamlike quality that isn't just established in the opening lyrics, but is also implicit through both the sonics and the way Tom is delivering the lines. You also don't necessarily notice that the tagline in the song comes, basically it's 6 beats instead of 8. So we get 1.5 bars instead of 2. So those extra couple of beats in that last bar really just work very, very nicely. When we get to the bridge, we have the first real change of direction in the song, and the first thing is that Tom's playing again over this 6 beats. So the 4 bars in this bridge section are 4 beats, 2 beats, 4 beats, and 4 beats. And it gives this section of the song a familiar anchor to the rest of the song, but also makes it move slightly differently again, so that, well, again, you know something's different, but unless you're actually counting, you probably wouldn't notice it. The bridge section also highlights, for me, where the acoustic version is more listenable or more impactful maybe to the percussion version. When we get to the bridge in its stripped back form, you can really hear that beautifully played second guitar with its brighter treble notes and all that space underneath the 2 guitar parts in the keyboard. When Tom sings, "Sing a little song of loneliness, sing one to make me smile," because of this space in the arrangement, those words are allowed to brew for a couple of beats and you get time to think about them. Whereas on the percussion version, because it's busier, it doesn't actually feel like we're getting this same reflective pause in the middle of the song. Okay, folks, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from last week was this: which New York State venue was the last place that the Heartbreakers played Saving Grace live? Was it A, the Beacon Theatre, B, Madison Square Garden, C, Forest Hills Stadium, or D, the Saratoga Performing Arts Center? What was I thinking when I wrote this question? Who the heck is ever going to know something that random and specific? Look, if you did know that, kudos to you. I suspect maybe you were cheating, but maybe you weren't. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you're just an even huger nerd than I am. But anyway, it's just a crazy question to ask. Anyway, the first time the song was performed live was May 30th, 2008 at the Van Andel Arena in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was performed a total of 94 times by the band during 4 different years. This is, of course, according to Setlist.fm. Some are missing. But it never became a must-play song in the set. The last time it was played was in 2013 as part of a 4-night mini residency at the Beacon Theatre. Tom performed Saving Grace at all 3 other venues that I gave you, but aired for the last time on May 25th of 2013, 5 days short of exactly 5 years between that and its first performance. Alrighty, your question for this week is this. Which legendary country artist does not appear on 2024's Petty Country tribute album? Is it A, Dolly Parton, B, Willie Nelson, C, Chris Christopherson, or D, Marty Stewart? Okay, back to the song. The last verse is structurally the same as the 2 before it, and we end on Tom repeating the line, "I can only thank God it was not too late," 2 more times after the sort of the tagline. And I know that this song was written before the tumultuous period leading up to and including Echo and the nadir which Tom sunk to during that time, but it almost foreshadows the fact that Dana came into his life at exactly the right time. It would be easy to go through, well, easy, but it would be natural to go through an awful breakup of a long-time marriage, with your kids caught up in the middle of an acrimonious, very challenging public split, and think that your personal life is basically over, no matter the measure of professional success that you might be enjoying. So when Tom writes, "I can only thank God it was not too late," it's almost like he's recognizing that lifeline and hauling himself back into the raft that Dana provides that will take him back to safety. And there's the obvious literal interpretation of God in the divine sense in that line, but there's also the colloquial sense in which that phrase is used to just express general gratitude for good fortune. When I sat and watched She's the One, the movie, as part of the preparation for this season of the show, the percussion number 4 version of the song that they used in the movie made sense. It sort of has a more cinematic feel, and the main scene in the movie in which it's used, it does feel right for having the percussion version in there, though I am tempted to edit in the acoustic version just to see if it also scans. However, the number 2 version, in my opinion, of course, only my opinion, that is the definitive version. I've definitely changed my position on the 2 versions of Walls, Circus and number 3, and basically I love them both equally now. That isn't the case with Angel Dream. Anytime I'm putting together a playlist for myself or for someone else, I will always include this song, but it will always be Angel Dream number 2, not number 4. As I noted in the bridge section, because that version is stripped back, there's so much more space in the song that really allows Tom's exceptional vocal performance to really, really shine. I also like the panning on that version as it adds yet more separation to the parts that we're listening to and makes it easier to enjoy each individual part as well as the whole. I also find that the percussion version, which, is still mixed impeccably, makes the track, it just makes it a little bit busy and loses just a few of those shades of its peaceful, languid flow. I'll wrap up by saying, the finger picking on this song is just exquisite. It's tenderly balanced, and I could probably just listen to that in isolation for hours on end. I've definitely fallen asleep to the number 2 version of this song on more than one occasion, such as its sense of peace and tranquility. The harmonies are brought in during certain sections to add to that longing and that positive heartache that you can get when you love someone or something so much. So it's not heartbreak, it's more just a sort of a heartache of love. And all in all, it's an absolute masterclass in wringing every possible drop of emotion and profundity out of a very simple arrangement. The last thing I wanted to comment on is the exceptional video that was released as part of the Angel Dream re-release of the She's the One soundtrack. While I missed the Wall Circus version from that reimagining, I do think it's an excellent take on those songs and sort of the resequencing, because the album leads off, as I think it probably should, with Angel Dream. The video is very psychedelic. It's at times Monty Python-esque. It's got that sort of dreamscape that blends bright colors with those very Terry Gilliam-like graphic animations. And there are also frames of Tom himself cut into the video at certain points, notably in the bridge and the intro, as well as a couple of animations of just his silhouette, which to me implies that he's still out there somewhere in the ether. Okay, Petty Heads, that's it for this week. It must be quite something to have a song written for you. something else entirely for it to be something as good as Angel Dream. Imagine Dana's shock and joy at getting a call from Tom and hearing him perform this song for her and about her, which would have been the first time anyone heard it, I would guess. I can only imagine the emotional response that must have elicited. It's one of the purest expressions of love I've ever heard, and yet, as I commented on, it still manages to mean everything to everyone at the same time. That's the exquisite genius of Tom Petty at work, and is the reason why Angel Dream, either version, but especially number 2, gets the strongest of all possible 10 out of 10 scores. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Deep Dive Podcast Network. You can go check that out at deepdivepodcastnetwork.com. Tons of great shows there, hosted by tons of great people. You can also check out my other podcasts, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I do with my best friend Randy Woods, and the Ultimate Catalogue Clash that I co-host with my great pal Corey Morissette. We are currently breaking down 10 albums from 1983, and I just finished Sticking the Boots to Pyromania by Def Leppard. If you're a Def Leppard fan, I apologize. I just really don't like that band or that album. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe as applicable. And again, please leave a review or a rating if you haven't already done that. Keep talking to me on social media, and I will read out your comments on the show. And as a weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way. So when you are looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms and go to your local independent record seller to buy some physical media. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to store.tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merchandise for this show, go to store.tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook if you're not already a member. And check out Channel 31 on Sirius XM, which is Tom Petty Radio. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to talk about a song that couldn't be too much different thematically from Angel Dream, the deeply wounded I Hope You Never. Bye-bye.